I wonder if this works. I wonder if this works. Hello, Uncle Sam. Nice to see you here. Sorry, I was just eating a little bit. I'll stop once we got like a few more people. Let's see if this works. Okay. Cool. I think obviously you can tell from the name of the stream what this is. So should be chill. Hello Nioski, hello Julius. So no shells can't show up, right? I want to try to like get at least one more person. Who can we get? Let's try to get where the heck is this guy, bro? Has it been this long? Oh, drumsticks offline. Well, might as well just send it to him anyway because we don't know. Let's see who's likely to show up. Well, 1, 2, 3. He's unlikely. He's offline. Yeah, this might be it, guys. I hope we can get at least one more person, but I don't know. Yes. So Learn English Brampton, by the way. He DM'd me. He's like, "Do you want to learn English?" I'm like, "Bro, what?" So I don't know what's going on with that guy. So weird. Anyway, stream only started like 3 minutes ago, so let's wait like 2 minutes or something. If we have no one, at least you three are active and would actually have opinions on what we're gonna stream today. So yeah, should make things fun and interesting. Oh, yo, Goomba. Welcome. Welcome to the stream, guys. Goomba, as an Italian, as you say, I'll be interested in hearing your opinions today on this. The stream, I think it should be obvious from the title. We're ranking European cultures today. All right. Sorry. I'm gonna wait like 1 more minute and then we're gonna get started. I have my tier list and everything there. So that's what it is. I'm just gonna eat like my last cookie and then get started here. Okay, well, you don't understand, but you'll see it soon. Alright, 30 seconds, then we'll get started now. You guys might see here Convertitore. That's because I opened this while I was in Italy, so. You don't live in Europe. Yeah, we know that, bro. But you're always out here yapping on about how you're Italian, bro. So. Also, wait a second. Huh. Okay. Alright, so I think we're just about ready to actually get started. It's gonna real quick check the Discord. If not, nothing happens. I'll close that because we don't need that here. Always interesting stuff happening in Al-Aqsa flood in the Islamic Cartographic Society. Alright, I think we can close that. We'll check in on how Al-Aqsa flood is doing soon. Okay, so audio, everything works well. Also, if my mic starts acting up, please let me know in the chat because obviously I can't hear myself. So, okay, so let's get started. All right, hello everyone. This is Mike History, and welcome to the official and uncontroversial ranking of all relevant European cultures, because obviously some of them, especially these like random ones in, I don't know, northwest Russia or something, we're not including those ones. But here we are going to make a tier list of every relevant European culture. It will be unbiased, it will be objective, and in case you can't tell, I am being sarcastic. Obviously, there's no way to objectively make these kind of tier lists. No matter how it is done, it will cause offense to someone. So let's start off with a couple of rules. First of all, this is based on my opinion. Should be obvious, but some people, you need to explain this to them, which means that this is not something you should take too seriously. Therefore, if I happen to put your culture in one of these tiers, do not get offended. It does not actually impact the way I see you or your people. It is simply just a vibes-based thing on the cultures. With that said, though, many of you, especially because it's usually the same people who watch all my streams, many of you will remember that I made a European cultures tier list a while ago. So why am I doing it now? Well, first of all, want to celebrate my birthday. I turned 24 a week ago, so it's partly a birthday celebration. And today we reached 3,600 subscribers, which is incredible because just 3 weeks ago I couldn't even reach 3,000. So first of all, thank you to all the 600 new subscribers. Now, I don't think any of them are watching the video now, but I still appreciate it. And also, thanks to the people who are here supporting me for my birthday. I'm also going to graduate this week, so that's kind of cool as well. But yes, once more to return to the actual topic. In case you don't understand how a tier list works, but I think most of you do, right? We have different tiers. F is at the bottom, then E, D, C, B, A. S is the best tier. And again, I will be putting each culture on a tier, but this does not affect how I think of people from that country. It is mostly vibes. But with that said, I did make an actual criteria this time instead of only vibes. And so I will explain what that criteria is, and it's pretty much my impression of the language, the religion, the living standard, the ideology, their contributions to high culture, history, the military record, the name of their country, how aesthetic their flag is, and also kind of just the general vibes I get from that place. So 10 different categories, and so this one will be more objective, but only more objective according to my own considerations. So once more, that should be explained. So if there aren't any questions, we can proceed. Also, here are all the cultures we will be ranking today. So quite a few, but it will make things interesting. So I'll go check the chat real quick and then we can get started. I love the trolling in this chat. Okay, folks, looks like we're ready. So we will start with Albanian. Now, one thing I will... Let me get back here. Now, one thing I will do here is I will first ask the chat where they think the culture should be, and then I will tell where I think the culture will be, and it will be interesting to compare what the chat believes versus what I believe. So we're going to start with Albanian. So let's start with that. Where do you guys think Albanian culture should be placed on this tier list? See, I can't tell if Nioski's trolling or not. If he actually loves Albanian culture, or if he's just making fun of Albanian nationalists. Okay, so we have two people advocating for S tier. Goomba and Uncle Sam, tell me where you would put it. They copyright their own patriotic song, so B tier, okay. Goomba, I hope is still here, but I don't even know, bro. Oh, looks like, yeah, he probably left. Alright, I'm not going to wait for him. But if someone wants to re-invite him, that would be cool. Sorry, I also have a little bit of cold, so hope you don't mind that too much. Okay, so everyone's saying S tier. So I think everyone's going to be mad because I actually think Albanian is the European culture I like the least out of any of them. So I'm putting them F tier. So I'll explain why. First of all, I hate their language. It looks disgusting, sounds terrible. They're also Muslim, so boo, especially on a mostly Christian continent. They're pretty undeveloped, you know. Haven't contributed much to history, honestly. Even their own history, it's like they weren't even unified most of it. They had Skanderbeg and he was cool. But other than that, their history is pretty unimpressive. Militarily, haven't achieved all that much. And I really don't like their flag. So between all those things, yeah, I'm sorry, but Albania is getting F tier. Now I know Albanians are the types that get very triggered because, of course, they're in the Balkans. But so far, I don't think I've ever actually had an Albanian that I know of comment on any of my videos before, unlike a certain other ultra-nationalistic Balkan group who the Albanians hate. So I think I won't get too much backlash for this. Alright, so looks like people are moving on to the next one. So, oh, Goomba's not happy about this. Okay, so next, where are we putting... Where are we going to put Armenian culture? That will be interesting. Okay, see. Armenia's well. The thing is though, Julius is just trolling though. Okay, Nioski gives them A. Uncle Sam gives them B. Goomba, if you do have an opinion, send it in real quick, and then we're gonna rank them. I love Julius's troll here. I mean, normally they're kind of bad, but like this one's actually funny though. Okay, so people seem to love Armenia here. S tier, B tier. Okay. So, where am I gonna put Armenia? I'm gonna put them E tier. Like, I know this is gonna trigger some people. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I will say positively about Armenia. Armenia obviously is one of the oldest countries, or one of the countries with the oldest history, not just in Europe but in the world, and they maintain their culture for literally thousands of years. And of course, they were the first country ever to convert to Christianity, which is awesome. But then at the same time, right, their language is like, eh. I mean, the religion's pretty cool, I have to say. Like, I vibe with the Armenian church, don't get me wrong. But they're, like, quite undeveloped, right? Like, pretty poor for European standards. What have they really culturally achieved over the last couple thousand years? Like, not that much. Like, I can't think of any real famous Armenian, of historical significance in recent times. Militarily, they're not that impressive. I mean, it's kind of impressive they survived this long, but they're always being dominated by everyone else, by the Turks, by the Persians, by the Russians, the Romans, right? And their flag's like, eh. So, between all those things, yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, it's not really impressing me. Yeah, so, sorry. Armenia's going E tier. Alright, next we have Belarus, or Belarusian culture, I should say, more specifically. So where are we putting that? Why don't I speak Italian in this chat? Well, no one, including you, actually speaks Italian, so I don't know why I would do that. Bro, what is Khachaturian, bro? Okay, guys, what do we think for Belarus here? Okay, Belarus B tier. Belarusian food's good. Never even heard of Belarusian food, so I couldn't tell you what it is. Belarus A tier. Russian is the only... What? Belarus is A tier. Russian is the only culture with A tier. But East Slavic brother, therefore A tier. I mean, I assume that applies to Ukraine then, because they're also East Slavic brothers. Okay, Uncle Sam, bro. Oh, he did comment. Okay. Bro, Fangul is not Italian. I was just in Italy, bro. Like, Fangul is not Italian. So, yeah, sorry, man. Yeah, sorry, some folks are texting me here. Alright, guys, let's go to Belarus. Alright, so I'm going to be putting Belarus in C tier. And I'll explain why. Alright, so Belarus does have more things going for it than I think go for some of these other countries. So for example, Belarus's flag, I love the flag. Now you guys can't really see it, although I'm sure if you're watching this stream you already know what Belarus's flag looks like. But they have this really cool embroidered pattern on the left of the flag, and so I think that's really cool. And I like the green and red combo. It's quite cool. So uh, I do think that that is some of the coolest stuff. Generally, I kind of like their culture's vibe. You know, they're Orthodox Christians, which is pretty epic. And, you know, they are relatively conservative. I mean, obviously, politically, the government's not great. However, at the same time, there are some things holding them back. Well, including that their government sucks. I would also say, too, that, you know, the fact that they are one of the most underdeveloped and poorest regions of Europe certainly doesn't help. Their history is very mediocre. Like, I think the first time they even got a country was in 1918, and then that barely lasted. So, pretty unimpressive history. Haven't really contributed much to, you know, any great cultural achievements. So, not very high for the culture. And militarily, they are very unimpressive. But at the same time, the aesthetics, though, and the religion's cool. So that's why we're putting Belarus in C tier. Now, this is where we get to one which I'm sure you will all have opinions on, and probably stronger opinions than the early ones, because I mean everyone knows about this country, which is of course Mother Russia. So tell me, where should we put Russia for this? Well, where should we place it in this tier list? Okay, so Julius unsurprisingly putting them S tier. I mean, he's partly right. He's partly oh cool, I didn't realize you could do this live translation thing. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. He's part Russian. Nielski likes them. Bro, I don't know what you're speaking. Is this like Sicilian? Like what? What is this? All right. Uncle Sam puts them in F tier. I mean, he's like an American patriot though, so that doesn't surprise me whatsoever. Um, Goomba, do you have an opinion on where we should put Mother Russia? Okay, bro. I don't know what this guy's yapping on about. Oh, he doesn't like Russia. All right. Oh, so you are American. Guys, someone needs to screenshot this. This is the only time bro's admitted he's American. So, someone take note. All right. So where am I gonna put Russia? I'm gonna put Russian in S tier. Our first S tier. Now, obviously, I know within this, you know, current political context, that can be quite controversial. But I'll explain why. First of all, I just have always loved and been fascinated by everything Russian. I think that they have so much aura. And in fact, you know, it was seeing the recent pathetic, you know, nature of the Russian military that in a way kind of shattered my image of Russia. But nevertheless, though, I'm still putting them in S tier. And let me explain why. All right. So, first of all, Russian language is pretty sick. I like the way it sounds. It sounds very epic, manly, you know, almost mysterious in a way. There are a lot of atheists there, but it is still, you know, decently orthodox country, so they get points for that. Pretty based overall, the people. They're like relatively conservative, but without being like kind of extreme, such as, you know, places like Bulgaria, for example. In terms of their contributions, these guys have contributed so much, right? I mean, they put the first people in space, right? They were the only superpower capable of rivaling the United States. I mean, unfortunately under communism, but that's still impressive in itself. They have a great history of literature, of art, of culture, of dance, right? Their architecture is super sick. Now, history-wise, right, these guys went from being subjects to the Mongols to later becoming, you know, the largest country in the earth on the earth today, and then under the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire were even larger than they were today, right? They were stretching all the way from Poland to Alaska, which is very impressive to think about. Militarily, too, the record is relatively impressive. Now, of course, Russia's had a lot of defeats, especially, examples such as World War One, where I place them in F tier. So if you haven't watched my World War One tier list, please go do that. But at the same time, though, you don't get an empire this big if your military is just trash. So for the military too, we gotta give them credit for that. And finally, their flag too. Their flag's really cool. Honestly, really the only thing holding Russia back is just how pathetic, their development and living standards are. You'd think after centuries and centuries of being an empire, they would have somewhat improved their living conditions, but they're so corrupt. They are famously backwards. And so that's kind of the only thing really holding them back, but they're still S tier. So that's where I place Russia. Now, the next country, or the next culture, I should say, sorry, because these aren't all, they mostly correspond to countries, but it's these guys. Does anyone know what this flag is first before I reveal what it is? Julius loves this, bro. He's like, yes, this is what I always wanted to hear. Okay, yes. These are the Rusins. So, I understand if you guys don't have an opinion on the Rusins. But if you do, why don't you type it out quickly here and then we'll get to them. Okay, fair enough. Alright, not many people know, so we're going to do Rusins quite quickly because, even I don't really care. So we're going to put the Rusins in E tier. They're a relatively cool culture in terms of, like, their language is alright. They're Orthodox Christians, I think. And they basically live sort of kind of the area between like Slovakia, Hungary, and Ukraine, if I remember correctly. But at the same time, right? Like they're a very small regional culture. No one can name a Rusin. No one knows what they've done, right? Like I can't even name one, much less their contributions to history. And as far as I'm concerned, um, I don't think that they've ever had a state either, or if they have, is super short lived. So yeah, they got the perks for being like Orthodox and Slavic and whatever is cool, but other than that, they're lame. So yeah, E tier for them. All right, next of course is Ukrainian, and with everything that's happened in the news, there's no way you guys don't have an opinion on Ukraine by now. So let's see what you guys have to say. Wow, Goomba, that's such like nice language. What are these irrelevant countries, my dear? Oh wait, this is this is translated. Never mind. All right, so Uncle Sam puts Ukraine A tier. Come on, what about the rest of you guys? I know you guys have your opinions on Ukraine. Your Ukraine video has 6K views so far, or so S tier. I love how your like opinion of Ukraine is purely based on a video, but okay. Well, yeah, let's I mean, Julius hasn't said anything, but I think I know what his is going to be. So, anyway, let's go back to sorry guys. There's someone trying to tell. I'm telling you to just join my stream. All right. So, let's go find where Ukraine belongs on this list. All right. So, for Ukraine, right? I'm going to put them as D tier. Let me explain why. So, Ukraine, right? I feel like Ukraine's alright. Like their language, it's okay. They're Orthodox, so that's pretty cool. And generally pretty based culture, pretty conservative. All things considered. The problem though really comes down to like the aesthetics are like mid. Like, come on, man, what is this flag? Blue, yellow, like that's lame, right? I mean, it's not the worst combination of colors, but it's like not a really cool flag. And then on top of that too, unfortunately, they spent most of their history being dominated by others. And I'm not saying this is like, their fault or anything, but at the same time, right, it means that I can't really put them up too high because their history is just like meh. And militarily too, they haven't been all that impressive. I mean, they're kind of impressive now, but we're talking about like throughout their entire history, not just today. Although the Cossacks were pretty cool, but they weren't all Ukrainian, although many of them were. And yeah, I don't know, the vibes of it, like, eh. So yeah, we're giving them D tier. I think one of the biggest things too holding them back is simply the fact that they're so backwards. They're one of the poorest countries in Europe. So yeah, unfortunately, they're gonna have to, stay there in D tier. Next, though, we have Bulgaria. So I am interested in hearing what you guys think for that one. I like how Julius is going full Russian nationalist mode here. So it's a little funny to watch. All right, so we got one S tier. What do the rest of us think? That's true. Bulgarians are spiritually South Sudanese, so I mean they're both like the blackest people on their continent. So I agree with that. So for Bulgaria, right? Where are we gonna place them? Well, pretty fitting. We'll place them in B tier. B for Bulgaria. But no, that's not the real reason. So Bulgaria, I generally think it's pretty cool. First of all, I kind of like the aesthetics of Bulgaria. Starting with their flag, right? I think their flag, although it is a simple tricolor, is one of the better ones out there. Also, their language isn't bad. They are decently orthodox, which is pretty cool. They are pretty based as well, relatively conservative. Militarily, it's interesting because their history's been like a mix. Like they had a massive empire in the past, which is pretty awesome, right? And they were one of the deadliest threats to the Eastern Romans, who were Greek, by the way. I just want to put that out there. But yeah, they had a pretty epic empire. I mean, they had a really interesting conversion to Christianity, which I covered in my History of Christianity series, which I mean, if you're watching this stream, you already watched it, but this is more for the people who are going to be watching the stream later. And so, all that considered, that's pretty cool. I kind of just like the vibes of Bulgaria. Not gonna lie. Now, as with many of the other countries I mentioned today, one of the things holding it back, though, is for living standards, it's still relatively undeveloped. It's not that advanced, and recently, historically, they haven't done all that much. But at the same time, though, and of course, yeah, they haven't contributed too much historically. But I like Bulgaria, so they're getting B tier. Next, we have Macedonian culture, which, is relatively controversial in and of itself. So let's see what you guys think.
You have to.
I did. Okay, so we have no opinion on Macedonia. Does anyone else care? Okay, Italians invented the red, white, green tricolor. We got the design from France. Slavics aren't. Bro, what are you talking about? Like, are you brain dead? Like, what's up with this guy, guys? Like, genuinely, I'm wondering. Macedonia F tier. So interesting. Oh, Step Historian, welcome, welcome. Okay, well, you haven't missed too many. Probably the only significant ones we've done so far are Russia and Ukraine. So, just speak Portuguese. Okay, we got A tier. So, people, I don't know, it's interesting. We got F tier, A tier. So, where am I going to put Macedonian? Well, I think I am going to put Macedonian in D tier. And yeah, it's unfortunate for some of you guys. Also, it's interesting because now I'm thinking about it. If I went purely based on the audience, I think all the cultures would be either like S or A, or like maybe a few F. But some of these have to be B, C, D, E. All right, let me explain why Macedonian's D tier. Okay, so Macedonia, I feel like it's just one of those countries that's like pretty forgettable. Their language isn't bad. I mean, some people say it's Bulgarian. I think it's different. And the religion's pretty cool. Like they're Orthodox again. They're pretty based politically, all that stuff. But their history is very unimpressive. Like they didn't even have a country until like less than 40 years ago. So they kind of get downgraded because of that. Militarily, like just completely unimpressive history. Alexander was Greek. Okay. So, given that Alexander is Greek, the Macedonians have like nothing impressive when it comes to their military history. Their flag's all right. I mean, I think it's based on Alexander, but they do not live up to that. So yeah, it's kind of like just forgettable, but it's not that bad of a culture. So yeah, we're gonna D tier. All right, next we got the Slovenes here. So what do we think of them? No. Well, Macedon, yeah, that's not Slavic, but Slovenes are goated NBA. So I've heard. Is this guy going the una fatsu una razia thing again? Upper tier, C tier. I don't know what you're talking about with gays, bro. Like what? Tito was Slovene. Wasn't he half like Slovene and half Serb or something like that? Anyway, let's choose where we want to put the Slovenes today. So for Slovenia, we're gonna put them in E tier. Yeah, I know a lot of cultures today, or I shouldn't say today. I mean, we just started the stream, but a lot of these are going to E tier or E or D. But let me explain why. All right. So Slovenes, their language is all right, religion's all right. Like they're Catholic, as a Protestant, as a Lutheran, right? Not a huge fan of the Catholics, but it's not that bad. their living standard is actually pretty good, especially compared to like all these other groups. Like, they're much more within the Western European kind of living standard grouping, and while also having relatively based politics, but at the same time, it's just historically right. Like, I mean, can we name any famous Slovenes in history? Like, I don't know what they've contributed. Historically, right, they've pretty much been dominated by everyone else. And I get it, there are not that many of them. But yeah, militarily, the record is completely unimpressive. And their flags, like, I'm not a big fan of their flags. So yeah, unfortunately, sorry Slovenes, but you're going into E tier. Okay, next we have the Serbs. And I'm sure this one won't have any controversy, especially because the Serbs, bro, they're like always commenting on any video where I mention them, and they make sure their opinion is heard loud and clear. Oh, hello there. Oh wow, Enes Kagritanyali. I've not seen this guy in like ages, but thank you for showing up. How many people do we have now? 6 people. Nice. Yeah, just preemptive warning, Enes Kagritonyali, because I know this is important for you Turks, but sorry, I'm not including Turks as Europeans in this tier list. You guys are like kind of in between, But as a Turk, though, I would be interested in hearing your opinion on Serbs here. Melania Trump is Slovene. No, that's true. That's true. But I don't think she's necessarily who they would want to be associated with, per se. Serbia's A tier, awesome music. Serbia's F tier. Of course, Uncle Sam thinks Serbia's F tier. Alright, Julius, do you have any serious opinions, or are you just going to spam again, bro? Serbians attacked Albania. Okay, so I guess Goomba's not a fan of Serbs. See, your take to make all Balkan countries A tier sounds nice, but they would all fight each other within the A tier. So it's still not that useful, all things considered. So where am I going to place Serbs? This would be controversial. I'm actually putting Serbs A tier. Alright, and let me explain why. So first of all, similar to the Russians, I've always just found like Serbian culture and history and everything cool. Like they have a certain aura to them. And similar to Russia, like I love their flag. Like I like this, red, white, blue tricolor, but done in a certain way. Because you can say, oh, well, Slovenia has it. But like, they have this like lame mountain. Like, look at Serbia, right? They have the crown and the double eagle, which the Russians also use. So I think already they're starting off on a good place there. Their language is all right. I mean, it's kind of the same as whatever Slovene, or not Slovene, but it's the same as Croatian and Bosniak. So even though they'll all be like, oh, we're different languages, this is not. But they do write in the Cyrillic script, which is cooler. Maybe it's just because I'm used to the Latin script, but Latin script is like lame. It's like standard, but Cyrillic, that goes hard. They are pretty orthodox, which I think is awesome, and also relatively based. Now, when it comes to contributions to history, I think this is also what helps. They have Nikola Tesla. They've done a decent amount of things, and also their art. I really like Serbian art. I know that they're not very famous for their art, but I think Serb artists are actually quite good. Now, historically too, they're quite cool. They had Yugoslavia, and yes, Yugoslavia became communist, but originally it wasn't. And I think early pre-communist Yugoslavia was actually one of the coolest countries. Additionally to this, they also had their empire, which is pretty awesome. I've learned a lot about Serb history simply because Serbs love reminding me of it. And yeah, even militarily, they've been all right. I mean, not that impressive because, they got overrun multiple times, Ottomans, Germans, etc. But they've always come back. And so, yeah, for all that and kind of just the aura for Serbs, yeah, I'm putting them A tier. Next, of course, we have their famous brothers, cousins, whatever we want to call them, the Croats, who, let's just say, have a very different opinion of the Serbs. So, let's see, chat. Where are we going to put the Croatians? Serbia's F tier because they claim to defend Orthodoxy while they betray the Byzantines. I've heard of this. I would need to get a little more info, but I mean, the thing is, right, no one was really actually fighting for Christianity, for Orthodoxy, for Catholicism. Like, everyone kind of just did, what was in their state's national interest. Like, a lot of the time, the Byzantines were just fighting other Orthodox countries. Okay, so we're getting A and B tier for Croatia. Anyone else have any opinions? A tier, okay. So people generally have a pretty positive view of Croatia. So where am I going to put Croatia? Or I should say Croatian culture, because we're not doing this based on country. We're based on culture. I am going to put Croatia as C tier. Kind of fits with the C thing. But anyway, let me explain why. So, I don't know. I mean, obviously, okay, when it comes to language, the same as the Serb. So, language is not playing any role there. They are like Serbs, but they're Catholics. See, someone should just take that part out of context. Just be like, yeah, Croatians are like Serbs, but they're Catholics. That will go well within the Croatian community. But nevertheless, they're just not as cool. They're like Serbia, but just not as cool. Like, they have the Latin script, which is lamer, and they're Catholic. And like this, don't get me wrong, I like the checkered thing that they have on their coat of arms, but it's not as cool. It doesn't have as much aura. Like, the crown is lamer, coat of arms is lamer. They don't have the eagles, right? Now, when it comes to their living standard, it's certainly higher than Serbia, although not by a huge margin. And they are still relatively based too politically, so I kind of like that. Now, when it comes to like the art and high culture and contributions, they've also done quite a lot. So we're not going to really compare them to the Serbs too much there. But yeah, when it comes to their history, it's a little less impressive. Like, they didn't have a massive empire like the Serbs did. And they were incorporated into Yugoslavia, which, if we remember, they weren't a fan of. And also, yeah, sorry, but their World War II actions kind of diminished them a little bit in my eyes. So yeah, it's like Serbia, but just y'all could have been better. It's a bit of an aura loss there. So sorry. Next, we get to the third brother or cousin, however we want to put it, which are, of course, the Bosniaks. So what do you think of them? Bosnians are cool, tough food and tough music. Yeah, I know, Nioski, you love Bosnians. I know that. Where are the rest of you gonna put the Bosnians? Or should they Bosniaks? Because technically Bosnian is just anyone from the area. Okay, so we got some Bosniak fans here. What do the rest of us think about this? Dang, bro, we lost half our viewers. No! I assume that's Step Historian and NS. Goodbye. It's nice having you guys. Okay, so everyone really likes the Bosniaks here. Well, I guess it's going to disappoint you. I'm putting them in F tier, guys. Right? Like, first of all, like, they're Muslim, which is like, boo. Also, their flag just sucks, man. Like, this would be cool, but then why add the weird, like, stripe here? Now, maybe it's because their country kind of looks like a triangle, which, alright, that's kind of cool, but at the same time, yeah, I'm not a fan of the Bosnian flag. Historically, they're not that cool. Like, they haven't really had a country. They've always been dominated by everyone else. I mean, I guess they weren't even really a people until the Ottomans took over, because when they convert to Islam, that's kind of when they separated from the Serbs and Croats and became their own people. So I kind of get that. But even today, like, their country's paralyzed because half their country's Serbs and they hate each other. And yeah, they've really accomplished very little. They are based, which is cool, but they are also relatively underdeveloped. So between all those things, yeah, they're getting F tier. Next, though, we got the Czechs. So where are we going to put the Czechs here? Okay, well, thanks for coming, Goomba. I'm not on Discord, but if you are on Discord and whatever Drumstick responds, tell Drumstick to join the stream. Okay, so we got an F tier and an S tier. It's interesting the atheist is putting them as the S tier, and the whatever religion you are, Julius, is putting them in F tier for not being religious. They're also liberals. I don't know if they're really liberals though, bro. I'm gonna be honest. Alright, so where are we putting the Czechs? We're putting the Czechs in E tier. So here's the thing, right? Czech Republic, like, they do have stuff going for them. Don't get me wrong. You know, they have decent living standard, right? They're relatively based. Their history is actually pretty cool too, right? Like, they were always kind of dominated by the Germans, whether it's like the Holy Roman Empire or, you know, World War II or all that. But at the same time, right? They've had a long-standing kingdom. You know, they've had cool stuff. They had the Bohemian Reformation. That kind of stuff is based. And they also had Czechoslovakia, of course. Their language is alright. And their military history, it's not that impressive, but it could be worse. I mean, they did have the Hussite Wars where they resisted, like, multiple crusades. So that's pretty cool. But really, right, there are a few things bring them back. First of all, their flag's just, like, lame, bro. Like, another... And look, I get I'm being hypocritical because it's literally the same colors. I mean, these are pan-Slavic colors, if you know. Red, white, and blue that we see for Russia and Serbia. But the Russian Serbians make it cool. Like, the Czechs just make it look kind of lame. And also, yeah, they're, like, super atheist, and so that's really lame. So, yeah, unfortunately, they're going to get E tier for that. Next, what about Slovakia, though? What do you think of their culture? You're part Moravian. Like, bro, how are you everything? Like, can I say this? Like, how is this dude literally everything? And he's the most random like things too. Like, he's probably like part Ingrian or something, this guy. Throwing corrupt priests out of windows is certified hood classic brought to you by Bohemia. See, these are the comments we need, bro. This right here. This is based. Let's see if we can pin this. Yeah, we pinned that, guys. You must return back to Agartha. Bro, what? No, you can't just drop a banger and leave like that. You're gonna stay, Uncle Sam. Alright, no one seems to have an opinion on Slovakia, so I'll just put it there. Slovakia, we're also putting them E tier. Look, guys. Alright, Slovakia is relatively similar. Like, you know, their language is alright. They're Catholic, so they're a little better. Living standards decent. Not as good as the Czechs, though. Their history's not that impressive, though. I mean, they've kind of been dominated by outsiders most of their history. Their military record especially is not impressive at all. Like, they're just being pushed around all the time. I'm not a fan of their flag.
It's kind of like the Slovenian flag, and funny enough, Slovenia, Slovakia sound pretty similar. But yeah, I don't know, guys. It's just, and I also think like, what has Slovaks actually done, bro? So yeah, I'm sorry. They're also have to gonna go to E tier. Next we got, of course, Poland. So yeah, what do we think of them? Where should we put them? Poland has not yet perished. Bro, this language, man. I actually can't. I can't with this. Ukrainian, bro. Why are we still talking about Ukrainian? Like, we're talking about Poland now. Dang, bro, it's crazy. It's been an hour. We're still at the Slavs, guys. Okay, final Slav, guys. Final Slav. You love alphabetical worlds. Ooh. All right. Has anyone actually though? Come on. Where should we put the Poles, guys? Where do you put them on the tier list? A tier still Russian. S tier. All right. Where am I going to put Poland? I'm going to put Poland B tier, which is definitely higher than wherever I put them last time. And I think it's because I used like a bit of a more objective definition. So here's the thing, all right? So Poland, right? They're very, very Catholic. And they're very devoted to it, which is awesome. Like, we like that. But at the same time, it's Catholicism, which is like, not the biggest fan of that. Living standard, it's not great, but it is getting better quickly. So we got to give them stand for that. Now, when it comes to their ideology, how based they are, fantastic, right? We basically couldn't ask for more. They are the model for what we want, when it comes to how to run a country ideologically. Also, really big fan of their high culture, really like their art, really like their architecture. It's very underrated, honestly. Like, people don't really know Polish artists or architects, or I mean, not architects, but architecture. But it is really, really cool. Like, they have some of the coolest castles, some of the coolest cities, some of the coolest designs in the world. And I think, they just go underrated because they were unfortunately taken over by the communists. So that ruined quite a lot of things. Historically, too, really, really impressive. I mean, after all, they literally had the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. They were once the largest country in Europe, right? They defended Europe on multiple times against some of the worst groups, whether that's the Ottomans, whether that's the Russians, right? Whether that's the communists. And, now against kind of like mass migration. So, I think that Poland really, really has an awesome history, and militarily too. Like, everyone loves to clown Poland for how pathetic they were in World War II, and don't get me wrong, they were, but they were also being invaded by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. So we got to remember that. We have to remember that for most of its history, Poland was like a military superpower. So all those things, bring up Poland. But why is it B tier, not A or S tier? Well, first of all, the flag is just mid, bro. Like, no. I'm not mid, because mid is mid. This flag just sucks, man. Like, okay, white, red, come on. This is like Indonesia, bro. Like, come up with something better, please. All right? The other thing, and the main thing really, is their language. I hate the Polish language, probably more than any of the other languages I'm mentioning here. It's just a bunch of like Z, B, C, Z, S, and it's like, I'm just like, bro, come on. And look, the way it's actually pronounced isn't that bad. Like, it's kind of Slavic, but like, why do you have to write it so badly? Like, you had the Czechs, you had the Slovaks, you had plenty of other Slavs who write in the line script. You could have made it look so much better, but instead you have this awful language. So yeah, I'm sorry. That's why you're B tier. Next, though, we have Latvian. So, what do we think of that? Okay, Latvia and Lithuania both speak the closest European languages to Proto-Indo-European, automatic S tier. Here's Polish. Oh, that's true. That's true. I like Nioski's point, though. This is a good point. I mean, I never thought of that, actually. But, yeah, Latvia and Lithuania are interesting because they're Baltic languages. Dang, bro. Alright, goodbye, Uncle Sam. But, you know, this might go on for a while, so come back if you can. Anyway, at least we got all the Slavs done in an hour. I don't know if that's good or bad, because there's a lot of them left. But there are a lot of Slavs, too. So, oh yeah, I guess we did Armenians and Albanians. But they're Slavs anyway. I'm just going to call them Slavs, I'm sorry. So, let's do what Nioski said. We're going to put Latvians A tier. Why? Well, first of all, the Latvian language is actually pretty cool. You know, even the way it's written, the way it sounds. I like the Latvian language. Also, Latvians are Protestants, so, you know, that's a W. We like that. Living standard could be better, but of course they were under communism, so I don't blame them too much for that. Now, they are relatively based, too, ideologically, so I like that. Latvian history is not that impressive, honestly. And especially not their military history. I mean, they've spent most of their history being dominated by the Germans, by the Swedes, by the Russians. So pretty unimpressive history, but I really, really like their flag. Even though it's quite simple, I like, you know, just the way the flag looks. It's simple, but it looks good, right? So because of that, for all those reasons, we're giving them A tier. And for the Lithuanians too, because I'm not going to bother checking the chat because I think it's mostly the same. Lithuanians too, they're also getting A tier. All right, and let me explain why. So the Lithuanian language, similar to the Latvian, is pretty cool. As Nioski mentioned, these two are the closest to Proto-Indo-European, which is pretty epic. They both speak Baltic languages, one of the only few Baltic languages in the world. Now, they are Catholic, which is a bit disappointing. But at the same time, though, they are still pretty committed to that. Now, on top of that, too, okay, living standard is kind of the same as with ideology. But at the same time, though, their history is really impressive. Because I was talking earlier about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. But obviously, that includes, well, Lithuania. And Lithuania, before joining with Poland, was also the largest country in Europe at a certain point. And they were also the last pagans, which isn't cool, but it is respectable, though. You gotta respect these guys who are holding out despite all the crusades, despite, you know, centuries and centuries of Christianity being there in Europe. Militarily, too, they were relatively impressive. I mean, they did get incorporated under Poland, but before that, they were their own power. And again, though, the flag, this flag is awesome. Like, genuinely, this is one of the best flags in the world. Again, shows that a flag can be simple, but very aesthetic. So yeah, we're putting Lithuanians in A tier. Now we finally get to the Celts. So starting, of course, with the Welsh. Of course, who could forget the Welsh with this kind of flag? So where are we putting them? Dan Vaskastan. Yeah, I knew. Ain't nobody care about Wales or Britney Spears. So I'm assuming then you don't have too high of an opinion of them. Okay, looks like we got one person back. I don't know who that is, but thank you. Alright, so no one seems to care about Wales. We're putting Wales in D tier. So let me explain why. So there is a lot I like about Welsh culture. And specifically, you know, for a Western European culture, their ideology is actually not that bad. Like, they have mostly managed to preserve their culture, which includes their language. Historically, too, I mean, they have been relatively impressive. Now, of course, they were conquered by the English, but for such a fractured and disunited group, the fact that it took centuries and centuries of the English to conquer them says quite a lot. So I respect their history, but again, because they got conquered by the English so quickly, or not so quickly, but so early though, for the military, it's like, eh. Now, the flag's alright. I'm not really a huge fan of dragons in general, so everyone's like, whoa, they have a dragon. But I do like the white and green background, and the red isn't too bad of a contrast, but it's not that great. But religiously, though, they are quite secular. I mean, they were Protestant, which is cool, but at this point, pretty much they're not anymore. And yeah, I really don't like the language. It's just like this, Kimru, like whatever. But all these Celtic languages, man, like I'm not a fan. So yeah, they're getting D tier. We'll check in real quick for Brittany, but if no one says anything, well, then we'll put them next. Let's see. Scottish people are cool. Cornish people are cool. Irish are okay. The Manx are cool. No fan of dragons, Islamophobe. I know exactly what you're referring to here. No opinion on Brittany. Fair enough. All right. Well, I do have an opinion on Brittany. So I'm still going to put them in D tier, though. And let me explain why. So, first of all, the positives. The flag of Brittany is one of the coolest ones. I really like this white and black contrast. It's kind of cool. It's kind of like almost edgy, goth. I don't know how to put it, but, I like that. I like their flag, okay? But... and their history is okay too. Like, they actually managed to be independent for a long time, right? They weren't part of Charlemagne's Frankish Empire. They managed to be a separate duchy. And sure, they were technically under French control, but they pretty much ran their own things for a long time. But militarily, though, like, just a complete joke. Like, the Bretons, from a military standpoint, were never impressive whatsoever. So, that's not that cool. Now, their living standard is relatively decent. I mean, they're part of France after all, and they managed to retain a good amount of Catholicism, but, they're not that devoted to it either as they once were. And again, like with other Celtic languages, I just don't like the language, especially the way it's written. So, yeah, we're putting them D tier. All right, next we got the Cornish. So does anyone have any opinions on them? Where should we put the Cornish culture? Okay, no opinion on them either. So we're going to put the Cornish E tier. See, the thing about the Cornish, right, is they've just not been that impressive overall. Like, okay, it's kind of cool that, they're still, or at least were, somewhat Protestant, which is based. And they have a very high living standard. I mean, after all, right? They're in England. They're in one of the most advanced parts, not just of Europe, of the world. And they also have managed to relatively successfully preserve their culture. I mean, I think Cornish died as a language and they revived it. The only problem, though, is the Cornish language sucks, right? And so that's part of the reason we're putting them in A tier. Also, their flag's just, like, meh. Like, okay, obviously, as I said, I like the white and black contrast, but there's too much black, too little white. It's got to be 50-50, just like me, right? So, unfortunately, Cornish, it's not going that high, especially when you consider, like, these guys haven't really done anything historically. Like, okay, they were kind of their own thing, then they got conquered by the English, and it's kind of it, right? So, again, E tier. Now, to a group that I'm sure we all actually have opinions on, because, I mean, how can we miss on them? The Irish. So, where are we going to put them? Your favorite English territory? Irish is very woke. That's true. Cromwell Republic. That's funny. Alright. So where am I putting the Irish? I'm putting them D tier, along with the other major Celtic nations. So, once again, here is why. So, religiously, it's interesting. They were very Catholic, and while he is, as I said, not a big fan of Catholicism, I did respect that, they were really committed to that part. Right? They fiercely defend their religion. So you got to respect them for that. At the same time, though, they're becoming more secular, so can only give them so many props for that. Now, ideologically, again, same thing. They were very based, very conservative, but unfortunately now they have gone quite leftist, and they're always whining about, oh, my colonialism, blah, 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 and they hate the English. And don't get me wrong, like, I understand, at least from an Irish perspective, right, the English totally screwed up Ireland. I mean, they, partitioned the island, and more importantly, caused a famine so bad that they still haven't recovered from it like 100 years later or 150 years later. But at the same time, right, there comes a point where you just got to stop like whining about the British and just fix your own country. So, that's also not really going in their favor. Historically, though, I do have to give them credit. They were fiercely resistant to British rule. And it took the English, right? I mean, the first time they tried to conquer Ireland, they failed. And then the second time they succeeded, but only after great effort. So again, once more, it's like I respect their efforts, right? These guys are really good at efforts, but it's just like fighting for the wrong stuff, right? Like Catholicism, like really terrible language, which luckily they mostly got rid of because their language just sucks. It like makes no sense. Like they have like and it's like pronounced Keith, and I'm like, what, bro? What? Also, the flag just sucks. I mean, it's like Ivory Coast, and I get it, like theirs came before Ivory Coast, but I'm not really a fan of the orange. I mean, I know what the orange stands for and that's based, but it like doesn't look good, with the green and the white, because the green and the white look good. And so for all those reasons, yeah, that's why I'm putting them D tier. Kind of just there with the rest of the Celts. Like, I have respect for the Celts, but the problem again is like they have terrible languages and they spent most of their time just fighting each other instead of uniting. So like if you think of what these Celts could have done if they united, it would be very different. So that's what I have to say about them. Next, we have the Manx. I'm going to spend a short time because I can't imagine people have that much to say about the Manx, but Ireland is an example how not to defend a language. In what way? I'm curious. Manx are good at racing. Yeah, I mean, I think they have like some giant like car racing thing around the island. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. It seems like you two are the only left. Maybe no shells will show up, but whatever. All right, Manx. We're putting them F tier. Sorry. So, with the Manx, right? Like, first of all, what have these guys actually done in history, bro? And I get it. It's a tiny island. They couldn't have done that much. But at the same time, right, they haven't really done anything. I've never heard of a Manx person. I couldn't name you one. Like, I was talking sort of about Slovenes or whatever, but with Manx, I literally have not heard of a single Manx person in my life. I couldn't name you one, even if you put a gun to my head. Obviously, militarily, they've done absolutely nothing. The flag's like... It's kind of aesthetic, but what is this stupid like 3-leg thing? Like I don't like that. That's weird. That's off-putting. But I do like the aesthetics of it though. But it's like I just don't like that combination. Living standard is pretty good, of course. I mean, they are in the UK after all. Although I guess that maybe isn't so self-evident in the current day. But yeah, once again, their language sucks. It's a Celtic language, which is already bad enough. But even among Celtic languages, it's definitely the worst one. Not a fan whatsoever of the Manx language. So yeah, they're getting F tier. Next, though, we got the Scots, right? And these are the final Celts for today. So, well, not for today. They're literally the only other Celts. We've already done 5 of the 6. So, what do you think of them? Scotland forever. I don't know if you know that, but there's also a painting called that, which is relatively famous, called Scotland Forever. I'm Scottish, so rate my people well. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really Scottish, but, you know, I do have that legacy. Okay, we got more people now, seems 4 people. Hopefully one of the other people's comments, but we're just going to give a couple seconds, then I'll rate the Scots. Okay. Looks like nobody's about to say anything. Alright, so Scots, where are we putting them? Putting them A tier. See, they're the only like good Celts. Let me explain why, alright? So first of all, now when it comes to language, just like all the other Celts, pretty bad language. And of course we're talking about Gaelic, not the Scots language, which is just bad English. I'm sorry. People are like, oh, the Scots language. No, that's just English, but like bad. Right? In the same way their accent is bad English. But putting that aside, putting the language, which is really kind of the main problem, as well as the religion, because they're like generally way too secular and kind of woke, therefore. Most of the rest, right, I like it, I mean, they are leftist, but they're actually relatively good at preserving their culture. It's sort of like Quebec. Like, they're both like left-wing nationalists. Which, I don't like the left-wing part, but at least they're nationalists, so that's cool, right? They're proud of their culture. They have a pretty good living standard. Now, when it comes to their contributions, man, these guys have contributed so much. I mean, Adam Smith, right? The Scottish Enlightenment. I mean, so much stuff, so many inventions. Alexander Graham Bell with the telephone. Like, there's so many things the Scots have done. And the Scots have sort of been like the kind of quiet behind the scenes character in most of what the British did. Like, obviously the English did the most when it came to the British Empire, but the Scots did a huge amount, and relative to the population too, a lot. And on top of that, Canada, our first prime minister and our second prime minister were both Scottish. The first one was directly born there. And their flags are also really cool. It's simple but really cool. St. Andrew's Cross, we like that. Military history is relatively good. I mean, they resisted English invasion and never actually got conquered. They almost did once, but the Braveheart, of course, right? William Wallace, they resisted that. Of course, they entered Great Britain through diplomatic union with James VI, who became James I. But yeah, overall though, we like Scotland, and also my last name's Scottish, so that plays a role too. But yeah. See, they're like the cool Scots, and also Celts, and unlike all the other Celts, they actually managed to unite. Like the Irish never united. Well, actually, no, the Bretons did. So I'm wrong about that. And maybe technically the Cornish and Manx, but they're like so small. The Irish and Welsh, man, these guys could have done so much more if they were united. So, and now we finally get to the Germanics after a long time. So we're doing all the Scandinavians, and also the cool thing, which it just looks cool. All the crosses here, right? Now, you guys already know what these are, but I'm just going to say it right. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Faroe Islands, Iceland, and England. And so, not only are the Germanics just based in general, but they also have awesome flags. So yeah, let's start with Denmark, though. Where are we going to put them? Oh yeah, I forgot you hate Danish. I forgot you really, really hate Danish. But yeah, does anyone else have anything to say about the Danes? They have good food. They invented Legos. Bro, what good food, bro? Don't these guys eat like raw fish? Like, this is one thing I will say about Scandinavians. Their food sucks. These guys just eat like raw fish or whatever. Danes are Swedes in denial. I like that. I like that mentality. How dare you insult pickled herring? Okay, Danish pastries are great. I'll concede that. I will concede that. So where are you going to put Denmark? Put in Danish culture, A tier. Alright, so here's the thing. So I actually, unlike Nioski, I actually think the Danish language is pretty cool. I kind of like, the weird like little O thing that they put on top of some of their letters. Of course, they are not only Protestant, but Lutheran. So obviously from a religious standpoint, they got a lot of points for that. I understand they don't really practice, but still, right? I like the fact that they are Lutherans, they're Protestants. High living standard, of course, like who wouldn't want to move to Scandinavia for living standards? And I understand it's expensive, but also, that's partly because they have a welfare state and all that, and they have high taxes. But at the same time, though, very high living standards, right? I mean, according to multiple of these, living standard things, Denmark consistently is like top 3, oftentimes is the top country in the world. Although I think Norway wins a little more. But it's one of the most developed in the entire world. Now, of course, ideologically, a little less cool because, they are Scandinavians and very liberal. But for Scandinavian standards, though, they are relatively based and conservative. So we got to give them A tier for that. Now, in terms of high culture, pretty cool architecture. They haven't had a tremendous amount of historical impact, but a decent amount, right? Some cool philosophers, Kierkegaard, cool historical figures. Historically, too, remember, the Danes almost they did conquer England. They united Scandinavia. And they almost destroyed the English nation on multiple times. I mean, the most infamous Vikings were Danish. So even though, of course, it does suck that they almost wiped out the English, mad respect, out of all the Scandinavians, they've definitely done the most historically in terms of achievement. But the problem, though, is that all their military achievements are in the past, right? You think about what have the Danes done recently? Well, they had Germany. They went to war with them and surrendered after 3 hours, which is absolutely pathetic. And also their flag's kind of lame. Now, I think it's the oldest flag in the world, which is, pretty aura, but at the same time, yeah, there's a couple of things that hold them back. So that's where we're putting them. Now we get to Sweden. Where are we putting them? To be fair, the Danes prevented total German conquest. How, though? Leo and I are both part Swedish, S tier in respect. Well, guess what? I'm also part Swedish. So, everyone in the chat is part Swedish, which is epic. So, we are giving Sweden definitely S tier, S for Sweden. First one in a long time. So, I have almost nothing but good things to say about Sweden. First of all, Swedish language, pretty cool. I like the Scandinavian languages in general, and of course, all Germanic languages. They are Lutheran, again, which is based, although there are a lot more secular, a lot less serious, which takes it down a little bit. But living standards are insane. One of the most developed, rich countries in the entire world. Now, the biggest flaw really with Sweden is their ideology. They're just so liberal and so kind of woke. I mean, I don't really like using that word, but, they are that way. They're way too soft, way too compassionate. But at the same time, look at what the Swedes have done historically, right? They created Gustavus Adolphus, one of the greatest, not just kings, but generals throughout history, right? They had a massive empire, almost knocked out Russia, fought Denmark, fought Norway, fought Sweden, fought Poland, fought Russia, all at the same time, rampaged across Germany. Of course, Russia itself was founded by Swedes, right? And we have to remember that pretty much all the Vikings who went east were Swedes, which is pretty awesome. I mean, they even made it all the way to Constantinople. So massive respect for the Swedes for doing that. Additionally, too, their military history, as I said, is quite impressive. I mean, the Swedish Empire goes underrated because it ultimately got destroyed. But Sweden has been one of the foremost military powers, not even just during the Swedish Empire, but throughout all its history. I mean, it was because Sweden that the Kalmar Union of all the Scandinavians united broke up. And also, I really like their flag. And so, between all those things, pretty much have nothing but positive things to say about Sweden. The only problem really is their ideology. So, that's Sweden, getting S tier. Next, we got Norway. So, where are you putting them? Norwegian is the best Scandinavian language. Norwegians are Swedes in denial. As much as I'd like to say that, I feel like Norwegians are more like Danes in denial, you know? I don't know who Thurbia is, but anyway, Norway, we're also going to give them S tier. See, Norway is just like the epitome of Scandinavia. You know, a lot of things I would say are similar to Sweden, so I won't go on too long. But again, same thing. I like their language. You know, I like the fact that they're Protestant, they're Lutheran. All right, so getting high points for that. Insane living standard. I mean, probably the best in the entire world, right? I mean, these guys, and not just purely economically too, but you know, great work-life balance. They have the mountains. They're healthy. They're fit. They're good-looking. All that kind of stuff. In terms of their art, you know, in terms of their architecture, really great. Norwegian artists are very underrated, but yeah, Norway's produced some of the best art. They have just like a kind of cozy, homey feel to it. Now, some of the problems is just like, you know, their history's not that impressive. I mean, they spent almost all their history being dominated by either the Danes or the Swedes. Don't get me wrong, I love the Swedes and I like the Danes too, but you know, that is a little lame. And militarily, they haven't been nearly as cool as the Swedes because, you know, after the Viking Age, the Norwegians kind of just haven't done all that much. But they have an awesome flag. They have one of the best countries in the world. And really, though, as with Sweden, the biggest Achilles heel is simply their ideology. Way too progressive, way too liberal. So they're slightly under Sweden, but again, solid S tier. We like Norway. And so next, we're going to do the Faroe Islands. I won't go on too long about them because, you know, it's not much to say. But do we have any thoughts on the Faroe Islands? You can thank the U.S. for my great Norwegian. How though? What does the U.S. have to do with Norwegian living standards? Norwegians worship Quisling. I'm not sure about that though. Faroese looks like Goshenaries. True, bro. Alright, well, I don't think anyone has a real opinion on the Faroese, and fair enough. You know, there's not much to say. Faroese, we're gonna give them A tier. So, Faroese, again, kind of your typical Scandinavian stuff. Cool language. Yeah, they're Scandinavian. Right? Their history's alright. I mean, they haven't done that little in their history, but at the same time, right, can't really name anyone Faroese. I mean, they're a small, isolated group of people, so they haven't achieved that much historically, especially militarily, like absolutely nothing. Their flag's all right, but it's kind of like just a lamer version of Iceland's flag. Iceland has a better flag. So they lose points on the flag. But what they compensate, though, is that they have really, really good living standard and also religiously, once again, Protestant Lutheran, but they're more serious about it. Again, we're going by Scandinavian standards, but still, they're the most religious out of the Scandinavians, and due to that, they get A tier. All right, next, though, speaking of Iceland. So where are we going to put Iceland? Sorry, guys, I'm a bit run down today. Yeah.
Can you please fold this laundry and add it to whatever laundry you had before?
Sure. You just keep that door closed because I'm in the middle of a call. Thanks. Icelanders or Swedes in denial. All right. I'm going to put in Iceland. So for Iceland, it's going to be a little controversial. I'm only putting Iceland in C tier, guys. I'm going to be honest. All right. You might say why though. Well, first of all, compared to other Scandinavian languages, I just don't really like theirs as much. Now, religiously, it's kind of the same thing. They're Lutheran and Protestant and all that, which is good. So we like that about them. Living standard, of course, is pretty good as well, as you can imagine. And they've been a lot better at preserving their culture. I mean, I'd say mainly just because they're so far away, right? And so isolated, so far north, so cold. But they are still relatively liberal, all things considered. The problem is, their history, they had, their Commonwealth thing, which is based in a sense, but it was this lame proto-democracy. They didn't even have a king, so that kind of sucks. And militarily, they've done absolutely nothing. In fact, they don't even have a military now, which is just really cringe. And their flag's eh. The flag's cool, but compared to all the other Scandinavian flags, it's nah. So yeah, Iceland's getting C tier. Now the next one, of course, this is one I'm sure we all have opinions on, which is England. So where are we going to put English culture here? Icelanders aren't Scandinavian. Yeah, I mean, I get they're not in Scandinavia, but they're populated by Scandinavia, right? They're culturally Scandinavian, so yeah. Sir John Walcott was an Englishman, automatic S tier. Okay, just give me 1 minute. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. All right, we're back now. Fortunately, looks like we're still just two people here, but that's all right. That's all right. All right, let's do England. So, Yorkshire represent England. Yeah, anyone who knows me knows exactly where this is going. England's clear S tier. No doubt about it. All right, let's explain why. First of all, English language. I mean, it's the language I'm speaking, you're watching this. You know, it's the global language, the most spoken language in all of human history. And to think of the fact that English went from a language spoken by, 2 million people in the Middle Ages to a language spoken by like what 1.5. Wait, what am I saying? 1.5? Yeah, I think 1.5 billion. Yeah, 1.5 billion people, bro, speak English. Now, oh, Chinese is more spoken natively. Okay, bro, just because like there are a lot of Chinese. Okay, English is spoken by more people than anywhere else, and also spoken all around the world. You find speakers in, of course, North America, huge amounts of them. Of course, you have the USA, good amount in South America, all across Africa. A lot of Europeans speak English. I mean, it's probably the most commonly spoken language in the EU, even though they left the EU, which is just a complete power move. Of course, massively in Asia, especially places like India, and then, of course, Oceania as well. So, English language alone gives them S tier. But not just that, their history is absolutely unmatched, right? To go from a group of people who were on the brink of extinction during the Viking Age to ruling 1/4 of the world's land and population in the early 20th century, that's insane, right? And again, so many times these people could have been wiped out, whether it's by the Vikings, whether it's by the Normans, whether it's by the Spanish, whether it's by the French, whether it's by the Germans. They always somehow manage to get their way out and come out stronger, come out greater. And again, the British Empire alone. And don't get me wrong, the Italians and French in particular have, and Spanish too for that matter, have really impressive histories. But the British one is simply outmatched. And of course, the military record, pretty much just flawless. I mean, of course, doesn't mean that they haven't lost here and there. But the fact that they've come out victorious in almost every war, especially every war of significance, says something. Now, the flag itself is pretty lame, I have to admit. I do like the cross, but come on, man. This is a very simple, kind of boring flag. And also the problem is they are not very religious anymore. Again, they were Protestant, the primary Protestant power, just based, but at this point, they're like more atheists than they are Christian, and they're a little too liberal. So those things all hold them back. But overall, though, solid S tier for sure. No doubts about that. So next we have the Frisians. So a little more obscure. Do we have any thoughts on the Frisians? One of the greatest writers in Argentina prefers English Spanish. Now that's treason. I am curious why, though. Your homeboy Shimon is Frisian. Why does Shimon sound like he's from Israel, bro? Your English is a much finer language than Spanish. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, English is generic to me, so it's hard for me to know what English is actually like as a language. But I just know that, English is spoken everywhere. That alone makes it S tier. English has 2 registers. You can say Holy Spirit and Holy Ghost. Anyway, it doesn't look like we have much of an opinion on Frisian. I'm going to put Frisian in D tier. And the thing about Frisian, right, is like, they have some good starting points, right? I actually think the Frisian language is quite cool. They have a pretty high living standard. But at the same time, though, there isn't really that much else to say. Religiously, they are very atheist. I mean, they're in the Netherlands, and specifically their area of Friesland is one of the most irreligious parts of the world, to be specific. Ideologically, relatively liberal. Now, when it comes to historical contributions, almost nothing. They pretty much have just been under Dutch or German control for most of their history, and therefore their military record is pretty much non-existent. Their flag's alright, but they have these like little heart things, which is kind of, teen girl coded. So, yeah, they're getting D tier. Next, though, we have the Dutch. So, what do we think of them? I could genuinely care less about the Dutch or the Flemish. Okay. Well, thanks for your honesty then. What about you, Julius? What do you think about the Dutch and I guess maybe the Flemish as well? Dutch are basically English, but less cool. Honestly, yeah, I would agree with that. And more money oriented, yes. The Dutch are like the Jews. Less artistic, I don't know about that. I mean, the Dutch had the Dutch golden age. So, you gotta give them credit for that. You know? As Jordan Peterson would say. So, where am I gonna place the Dutch? We're going to place the Dutch A tier. I like the Dutch. I like their culture quite a lot. So here's what I can say about the Dutch. So first of all, I really like the Dutch language. Now, a lot of people don't. And don't get me wrong, the way it sounds is not that great. But I really like the way Dutch is written. It's kind of cool. And I've been to the Netherlands, and I can actually understand a good amount of Dutch just from how it's read. It's only when it's spoken that it becomes a problem for me. Now they have a pretty high living standards, which is awesome. Also culturally and artistically, some of the greatest people on earth. I mean, you think about the Dutch Golden Age, you think of the beautiful flowers that they have there, the really, really cool and unique architecture that they have. And historically too, just very, very impressive. I mean, you think that this is a group of people who dominated, entire trade flows around the world. I mean, they had a massive commercial empire. They basically invented capitalism and were one of the major powers for almost 100 years, all while fighting an 80-year war against the most powerful country in history up to that point for their independence and winning. So very impressive. Militarily too, quite impressive. Now over time they did kind of stagnate and become lame, especially after Napoleon. But until then, right, the Dutch military was quite contentious, or quite something to contend with. Now, they do lose some points for their kind of lame flag. Their old flag was definitely better. And also the fact that they are very irreligious, that takes away some points. But overall, though, we're giving the Dutch A tier. Next, we have the Flemish, who one could say are just Catholic Dutch. And in many ways, that is true. And we are going to put the Flemish in C tier. So again, part of it is because they have a lot of the same things as the Dutch, but they're Catholic. So again, a little lamer. But also, they just haven't done as much. Now, don't get me wrong. Artistically, these guys have contributed so much. I mean, I think, Rubens, Peter Paul Rubens was Flemish. And the Flemish have contributed a lot. And especially artistically, culturally, right? The Flemish, they've done a lot. But their language is like Dutch, but just a lot lamer. And they're also decently irreligious at this point anyways, so even the Catholic part, it's not even that relevant. But they do have a high living standard and, pretty good flag. I like the flag of the Flemish. But part of the problem is they're, in Belgium, which is relatively progressive. And also militarily not very impressive. And I'm talking about both Belgium and the Flemish as a whole. The Flemish, unlike the Dutch, have always been subjugated. Whether we're talking about the Austrians or the Spanish or the French or the Germans. So yeah, Flanders is getting C tier for that. Next, we have the Germans, and yeah, definitely going to be checking the chat for this one. It looks like we might have one person. Okay. Oh, Nioski did. It's just because Jew's been spamming. Yes. Taught the language, can't diss them. Germany's S tier. I love Germany. And yeah, when we're talking about German culture, we're also talking about like Austrian, Swiss culture, whatever. Germany above all. And we're going to unpin this because I keep thinking he's back. Okay. All right, so where are we going to put Germany? Germany's S tier. No doubt about that. Germany's S tier. All right. We love German culture for multiple reasons. All right. So first of all, let's start German language. Now, of course, I love to kind of rag on the German language, especially like Hitler, all that. But the German language is generally one of the coolest languages. It is very austere, not a very kind of pleasant language to listen to, but it has like a kind of force and depth to it, that I respect. I respect really like the power of the German language. It kind of fits in with what we know about them. Also, very, very high living standard. And they are very meticulous, very clean, very organized. And that's something I really respect about them, The Germans, they make sure everything's top tier, right? These guys don't play around in any way, right? These guys don't play around, whether we're talking about, culturally, military. Like these guys, whatever they do, they put their full effort into it. All right? When it comes to high culture, like they're in a league of their own. All right, when you think about the Germans, when you think about the music they've created, when you think about the art that they've created, when you think about just all the cultural contributions, right? Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, the printing press. Germans invented the car. Americans forget that, but the Germans invented the car. Lots of great food, some of the most beautiful architecture in the world, some of the most awesome, incredible castles, many of the greatest artists, and of course, the Protestant Reformation. We love that too. And additionally, too, the Germans are just like a very epic people. You look at their history and their military record. I mean, these guys, especially if we're talking about the German state, right? You talked about how Prussia was an army with a state instead of a state with an army. I mean, these are some of the most militarily impressive people. Now, unfortunately, they tend to lose because they literally just attack everyone and they're very aggressive. But at the same time, though, gotta respect the German military. I mean, even now they are recommitted to becoming the strongest army in Europe, which, good luck for Germany's neighbors. But, I really respect that. They have an amazing flag. I love the German flag. The combination, all of that is super cool. And, yeah, really, the only things that are kind of lame is that, Germany, unfortunately, now is maybe more Catholic than Protestant because of the communists who took over East Germany, and so they made that whole place very irreligious. And also, they are way too progressive, unfortunately. They are not the manly men their ancestors were. And this isn't endorsing, of course, some parts of their history, which you know exactly what I'm referring to. But at the same time, this is a country with so much, industrial, artistic, and just military potential that they're not using. But nevertheless, though, solid S tier. Next, we have the Greeks. And of course, I'm sure we'll have lots to say about them because they're literally the Greeks. So what do we think of the Greeks? I love that. Germany said, let me get this straight. You want me to march through Poland to fight Russia? Freaking get minions against Turk. No. But yeah, I was wondering though, in all seriousness, I know we're doing a lot of trolling, but what do we actually think though of the Greeks? You love Greece? I love Nioski's like standard for everything. It's like I have a homeboy who's this, I have a homeboy who's that. We like hung out in like the Armino, Nats Bowl communist server back in 2019 on the weekends. I feel like that's all his comments right there. So where am I going to place the Greeks? I'm going to put them B tier. And here's why. All right, so the thing about Greece, right, is Greece has a lot going for it. First of all, center of the Greek Orthodox Church, which is awesome. and still relatively religious too, especially for European standards. So they have that going for them. Pretty based country overall, and history, just simply unmatched history. While I mentioned the British and how cool it was, I mean, the Greeks literally invented European civilization. They have the oldest, right, continuous history and culture in Europe. And there are literally like no one who can even rival them. Even other older groups like Italians or Armenians don't hold a candle to the Greeks. I mean, the Greeks had an entire civilization and they dominated ancient Europe for centuries and centuries. And even after they got conquered by the Romans, they brought so much to the Romans. So, I mean, especially because it's a history channel, I'm not really going to explain why Greek history is cool. You already know why, right? Whether we're talking about Athens, Sparta, Homer, Trojan War, Alexander the Great, the Byzantines, even the Greek War for Independence. Those are all very cool. The problem, though, actually ties into this, which is that all of Greece's cool accomplishments were pretty much mostly done before Rome, and if you want to include the Byzantines Greek, well then mostly before the Ottomans. But the Greeks, just since their national revival, have just not been that cool, and that's kind of why they lose points, because like all their heyday is so many centuries in the past that I can't really give them like S tier for that. Additionally, there are some other things. Their living standard isn't that great, and this is even despite not being communist, so they don't really have an excuse for all the inflation and debt that they have. The Greek language is all right. It's not that bad, but it's not the best language in my opinion either. And their military history, especially recently, is just not that impressive. I mean, don't get me wrong, they used to be a military superpower, but like with most of the cool things about Greece, is just all way too far in the past, and that really is the problem with the Greeks and why they can only get a B tier. Next, of course, we got the Italians, and y'all know, right? With Italy, this is more than just like another culture, right? I have a special connection to Italy. But yeah, what do you think for the Italians? Oh, Gabagoo, how you doing? How you doing? Oh my goodness, what the heck? Why are there fireworks? See, if I was in America, I would like actually be scared because it sounds like a school shooting, but I think it's just fireworks. Gabagoo, gabagoo. Well, I hope it's not all gabagoo. I hope it's not all as funny as that is. What do you think of the Italians, And it's kind of weird. It's saying there's 0 people here, but I see both of you, so you like Italians? Fair enough. Prefer Italian American, bro. What? Anyway, where are we gonna put the Italians? I'm going to put Italian C tier. I know this is going to be controversial, but alright. Y'all got to hear me out for this one. So, the thing about Italian, right? Okay, I speak Italian, don't get me wrong, but I don't think Italian's that cool of a language. It's like, it's easy. It's a simple language, but I don't think it's that good of a language. You know what I mean? Now, they are Catholics, which again is like, but at the same time, they are relatively serious about it, so I got to give them respect for that. So they aren't losing too many points due to religion. They also have a decently good living standard. I mean, not the best, but at the same time, la dolce vita, Italians, they enjoy life, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, culturally, right, the Italians have contributed so much. Whether we're talking about the Renaissance, we're talking about Baroque, we're talking about some of the greatest artists, right? We're talking about Michelangelo, we're talking about Bramante, Leonardo, Raphael. So many Italian artists, so much high culture, so much of the great music, so much of the beautiful architecture, so much of this is Italian. And so really culturally, right, the Italians have so much going for them. And historically too, right, you think of all the things the Italians have done. But again, part of the problem with Italian history is since these guys pretty much never united, a lot of their accomplishments were sort of outsourced to other people, right? John Cabot, Christopher Columbus, Giovanni da Verrazzano, right? All these people could have been sailing for Italy, but instead they sailed for England, France, and Spain, respectively. Right? So that's kind of part of the problem with Italian history. Spent too much of it fighting each other instead of being united. Now, granted, Italians weren't really actually a culture back then. They are now. But I would say Italian was more of like a just pan-cultural identity because they all spoke different languages. And in some parts they still do. But part of the reason, though, Italy's just C tier is because, as with Greece, so much of their historical achievements are stuck in the past. And on top of that, too, their flag is just kind of lame, honestly. It's just like, It's like Ireland. It's a little better, but still. It's not that good. And to also their military history, I'm sorry, but, you'd think when you unite such a great people together, they would have accomplished something. But instead they have, I think, relative to both their size and their history, maybe the most pathetic military history in recent European history. So for that, they got to get C tier. All right, next we have this group. Does anyone know who these guys are? Just out of curiosity. Italy's military is epic, bro. What? No, they're not. Pierre mentioned. Okay, he knows. Yes, it's Corsica, for those of you who didn't know. So, do we have any opinions on Corsica? Awesome language. What? Brother, what? If you're talking about Rome, but I'm talking about Italy, though, not Rome, bro. Napoleon was overrated. I know nothing else. Fair enough. So where am I putting Corsica? Putting them in F tier, bro. Okay, here's the thing. Corsica had Napoleon, and we respect them for that. But he wasn't even fighting for Corsica. He betrayed Corsica for France. Because here's the thing about Corsica, right? First of all, their language sucks. Terrible language. Not a fan of the Corsican language whatsoever. They should speak French or Italian, but not Corsican. They're like Catholic, but not even. You've just become secularized like the rest of France. That's pretty lame. Okay, living standard, but not that good either. History, like, they've had decent history, but again, like, spent a lot of their time being owned by Genoa and then later by France. So how much of their history is that cool? I mean, it's long, but I mean, how much of it's that impressive? Like, again, historically, Corsicans produced Napoleon, but pretty much nobody else. And due to that, right, there's not really much I can say for their history. And also, I hate this flag. Like, even just aesthetically, what is this? And then also, why is it like a black guy with a headband? I think it's supposed to represent the Moors, but still, this is so weird. Yeah, so sorry. They're getting F tier. Next, do we know what this flag is? I think you guys probably do, but, just double checking. So it's Sicily, yeah. What do you think of Goomba's country? A Goomba, Sicily more like fungal, fungal. Hey, I'm a Sicilian, bro. Oh, he's finally here. Hey, he came just in time for Sicilian. Welcome, Crispy Fritz. Nice to see you around. Came just in time for Sicilian. Salami alaikum. I like that. Sicily's a part of Sweden. Thing is, that's not even that. Your phone died. Sorry to hear that. Wait, so were you tuned in otherwise, like before? I'm just wondering. It was not. Alright, anyway. That's all right. So where are we putting Sicily? Well, no one's really said anything, but I'm putting Sicily F tier. All right. And not just despite Goomba. Okay. See, the reason I'm putting Sicily F tier, there are multiple reasons. So, first of all, the Sicilian language is one of the worst languages in all of Europe. And unfortunately, a certain individual on Discord has made me very aware of that fact. Now, on top of that too, they haven't produced all that much culturally. Don't get me wrong, they have a good culture, or like from a kind of like, you know, artistic, whatever, architectural standpoint. But they haven't really been producing that much culture. Like, when you think of all the achievements of the Italians, the Sicilians are notably absent. Instead, what do they have? They have the mafia, bro. Which is like, yeah, they have some aura, but come on. All right. So there's that. Militarily, pretty lame. I mean, Sicily has spent all its history just being dominated by others, right? They were conquered by the Greeks, by the Carthaginians, by the Romans, by the Byzantines, by the Normans, by the Aragonese, by the Spanish, by the Neapolitans, by the French even, I think, at some point, and by the Italians most recently. So the Sicilians are just like always getting conquered. The military history super lame. Now, their history itself is like somewhat cool, right? Because they had a long history. But again, most of that history is being dominated by other groups. Now, they are relatively good at preserving their culture, so I will give them credit for that. And they are pretty Catholic, which again, I've said it multiple times. Kind of boo, but at the same time, pretty committed. So I respect the hustle. I respect that. But yeah, also this flag sucks. All right, I do like the aesthetics, right? The red, yellow, I like that. But what is this stupid flag, bro? Like, why do you have 3 legs? That's just weird, man. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're getting F tier for that. Next, do we know what this flag is and which culture this represents? Oh, so Goomba's back, bro. Oh, now he's back. Generally, bro, how did this dude find this? Are you talking about me or are you talking about Goomba, bro? Don't fucking insult Sicily. All right. Next, we have Wallonia. Does anyone have any opinions on Wallonia before I get to it? Armenia, we already did. Oh, why is it only an E? Yeah, you'll have to just rewatch. I will upload this stream as a video, obviously cutting out the chat parts, so you can watch that part directly. But I explained my reasons for why Armenia is an E tier. Anyway, no one's really saying anything for Wallonia. Wallonia, I'm going to give C tier. All right, so here's why. So, Wallonia, I mean, their language is pretty meh. It's like French, but it's not even as good, bro. So it's kind of like worse French. And religiously, it's similar to Flanders. Like, you know, they're part of Belgium. They both were Catholic, but now they're just pretty irreligious and secular, which is kind of lame. Become quite progressive. But they have decent living standards and a relatively cool culture as well when it comes to, you know, history and architecture and art. But again, not as impressive as Flanders. Like, it's kind of just like unimpressive compared to its neighbors. Like, not as cool as either the Germans, the French, or the Dutch. And I think that's kind of the problem with Wallonia. And I understand, you know, they're in that neighborhood. They have high standards, but at the same time, you know, if you have such impressive neighbors, you should also be impressive yourself. Now, I will say they do get a lot of points with history, though. Walloon history is quite cool. But unfortunately, as same with Flanders, spent most of it being dominated by others, Spanish, by the Austrians, by the Germans, by the French. And so that's kind of part of it. And so militarily, they haven't done all that much. But at the same time, though, I do have an affinity for Walloon culture. I really like their architecture, and I think the flag is cool. It's actually more French than France itself. So I will give them that. And now, of course, we are going to get to France. Everyone has to have an opinion. France is it's a main character of Europe, for better for worse. It is. So, tell me what we think of France. France or farms sometimes low key. Fair enough. Nioski's are gross. Goomba doesn't like the French. All right, Mr. Walcodia here. What do you think of the French? France gets clout on for World War II too much, and all of its other major victories and success are underrepresented. I just dislike the French language. France gets unfairly hated. France still technically won. I mean, yeah, technically. So where am I going to put France? It might surprise you. I put France in F tier last time. I'm actually going to put France in B tier. All right? Here's why. Obviously, this pains me as an Anglophone, someone of English descent, someone who lives in Canada, bro. Guys, actually, speaking of France, bro, yesterday I was in Quebec. Yesterday, all right? Last night I was there in Quebec. I had to speak French. Here's the thing, though. The French language is not that bad. I wouldn't say it's like the best language. Sometimes people romanticize it too much, but the French language is a relatively good language, all right? So they got points for that. Decent living standards. Now, really, the reason they're up so high, right, is because of some things. So, first of all, culture, right? France just has so much culture. Think of French literature, French art, French architecture, right? French fashion, French food, right? France has some of the best food in the world. France has some of the best art and artists in the world. France has some of the best architecture. I mean, when it comes to culture, right, France almost in a way is the benchmark for culture, especially high culture. So we got to give France the credit for that. And on top of that, it's not just all cultural stuff like Italy. They've also, unlike the Italians, for example, made a lot of advancements in science, in technology, right? In nuclear technology, and a lot of different things, right? On top of that, too, French history and military accomplishments are very impressive. Now, they aren't as impressive as the British, but the fact that they were and I should say really the English, but the fact that they were the only ones who really ever seriously rivaled the English, and they had such a legendary kind of battle and vying for influence for centuries, that's awesome. Whether we're talking about 100 Years' War, whether it's about setting up parallel empires, whether it's about Napoleon, Louis XIV, right? This rivalry literally was probably the single rivalry that shaped, the world the most. And the French, unlike really most of these other European empires, they had multiple empires. I mean, they had the first French Empire, the second French Empire, the first French colonial empire, the second French colonial empire. Arguably, they still have one today, third colonial French Empire. Their language is spoken in large parts of the world. Of course, here in Canada, it's inescapable. Some parts of South America, very large parts of Africa, and even a little bit in Asia. So we got to respect the French for spreading the language and their civilization around the world. And even then, their military history is quite impressive. Now, while people will... Now, the problem with French military achievements is basically, right, you have this stupid, like, oh, they lost World War II, blah, blah, blah. So they say, oh, France sucks militarily. Then people will go the other way and say, oh, France is great militarily. And don't get me wrong, from a historical standpoint, definitely one of the greatest. But it is objectively true that since Napoleon, France's military has gotten worse and worse over time. But it is still one of the best in the world. World War II shouldn't form a huge part of it, but France over time lost its military edge, and that does need to be acknowledged. But still one of the most powerful and strong military societies throughout all of world history. So we give them the credit for that. So yes, especially the history, the culture, and the military, that really is what gives them such a high ranking. But again, the religion, they were quite Catholic, but now they're just like mostly irreligious. The French Revolution, secularism, laïcité, so that's pretty lame. And also too progressive. And I don't like the French flag. I'm sorry, I don't. It's iconic, but I don't like it. So That's why France is in B tier. Had to say a lot, but you know, for some of these great countries, the Germans, the French, the English, you gotta go on a little more than if you're talking about like the, you know, Faroese or Manx, for example. All right, next, I think you guys know which one this is. These are the Catalans. So, do we have any thoughts on them? Have you seen the French Aura farming at Koblenz? I actually haven't. You speak broken English and gibberish, bud. I'm gonna say one thing, Micah. Make a map of hot women in France. In France specifically? Why? Spy from TF2. I don't know what TF2 is, but that's cool, I guess. Yo, where is Julius, bro? Julius, come back. We need you, bro. How do you not know? Bro, I don't know any of this stuff. Like, guys, any reference, I probably won't get it. Your Gumar is French. Bro, what is this? Like, what is your Gumar? Is this your, like, Gunnar? Like, what? This is a tornado warning. Bro, tornado is not a good excuse to leave the stream, buddy. I like France. I hate Quebec. Well, anyway, we're going to go with the Catalans. So, Catalans, we're going to put them in E tier. No, after here. So, here's the thing about Catalan. So, the thing about Catalans is just they haven't achieved all that much. I mean, their history is all right. Like, don't get me wrong. They have a decent history. You know, they've been quite independent-minded, right? They've sided with the French multiple times against the Spanish, right? Whether that's in the 30 Years' War or the War of the Spanish Succession, and, you know, even during the Spanish Civil War. So I respect the, you know, the hustle for independence. They're proud of their culture. At the same time, though, the military record just is pretty much non-existent. Like, Catalans have not been very impressive militarily, and additionally, too, their history is not that impressive. Again, mostly just spent being under the rule of the Aragonese or the Spanish or the French. You know, religiously, they're Catholic, but even then, not really. They're relatively secular, especially for Spanish standards. So that's not that cool. And I really don't like the Catalan language, especially. So, yeah, I don't know. They do have a pretty decent living standard, though. I'll give them that. So, for that, yeah, I'm going to put them E tier. They don't deserve to be F tier, but not much higher. And their flag, too, is meh. Their flag is meh. Not a huge fan of their flag. All right, next we got the Occitans. What do you think of them? I'm on. Catalans are good at soccer. Gumar is Italian for a side woman. You know, a background too, a talking machine, a woman who walks around. All right. Do I hate Armenians? Bro, I don't hate Armenians. All right, I just don't think like Armenian culture is all that. That is literally all. But yeah, where are we at when it comes to the Occitans, guys? Occitanian is an awesome language. The F is Occitan. Well, we'll find out. So Occitans, put them F tier. So the Occitans basically are the inhabitants of southern France. Their culture largely doesn't exist anymore, and that's part of the reason I'm giving them F tier. They've been pretty much all but assimilated into French culture. They haven't really produced much of their own. They also were the home of the Cathars, which is heretical and, really dumb. They were like this weird Christian cult back in the 1200s. So the problem with Occitans is they kind of peaked in the Middle Ages and then have just been thoroughly just Frenchicized or whatever. Like they almost completely lost their culture. Now their flag's pretty cool. I like their flag, and I do to some extent sympathize with their culture. But again, the problem is just like they've just become almost indistinguishable from French to the point of where, like, if you go to southern France, it just kind of feels like France. It doesn't really feel like a separate culture anymore. And not that I think that's bad. Like, French culture is better than Occitan culture, but especially because their language sucks. But at the same time, right, y'all kind of lost it, so you get F tier for that. Sorry. All right, the next one that we are doing is Aragonese. Now, I understand this is the Valencian flag. I mistook them because they look quite similar. But yeah, what do we think Aragonese culture, though? You don't know anything about Aragonese, fair enough. Let's ban this guy. I'm kidding. On Aragonese, bro? Do you have such a strong opinion on Aragonese that YouTube would ban you for that? I mean, I know they wouldn't literally do it, but still. I can't imagine you hate Aragonese that much. Okay, it doesn't look like people know much about Aragonese. I do know a decent amount of Aragonese, and so I want to share that. All right, so first of all, Aragonese, right, they are located in eastern Spain, pretty much between where the Spanish, the Catalans, and the Valencians are. Again, this is the Valencian flag. I'm sorry, I meant this to be the Aragonese flag, but they look quite similar. I mean, again, kind of all the same, similar to the Catalan flag. Here's the thing. I've always kind of liked Aragon. Aragon, by the way, if you guys know about Ferdinand, right, the king who was married to Queen Isabella, when they sent off Columbus, right, he was a king of Aragon. It was actually the union of Aragon and Castile which created Spain. Because, I mean, Spanish culture pretty much is just Castilian culture, but Spain has a lot of regional cultures, including Aragonese. Now, here's the thing, right? Aragonese have had quite a lot of impressive history and culture, especially when it comes to their architecture. The Aragonese had an entire empire. I mean, they were expanding into southern Italy. They had a crusade. They even attacked the Byzantines at some point. And so their history is very impressive. Militarily, they haven't been too unimpressive either. And I quite like their flag. Again, this is not exactly their flag, but it's quite similar. The problem, though, again, kind of Catholic, but then became secular. And as with a lot of these Latin languages, not a big fan of their language. So due to that, they are getting C tier. But again, this is the same group as like Italians and Walloons, so it's not a bad tier to be in, all things said and done. Next, we got the Friulians. That's what this flag is. Any thoughts on the Friulians? I don't imagine, but just in case anyone does have something to say about it. You should sing Demons by YB on stream. Who's YB? Aragon sounds like a... Does anyone remember Aragorn or Aragon or whatever who used to be in my server? NBA Youngboy. Yeah, Columbus was Spanish, bro. Like, what are you even talking about? Oh, you don't know who the Friulians are. Fair enough. I don't think anyone knows the Friulians, so I'll just skip and get straight to the point. So the Friulians, basically, they live in this area of Friuli, northeast of Italy, close to the Slovene and Austrian border. What can I say about Slovene or Friulians? Absolutely nothing. Couldn't name you a single Friulian. Couldn't name you a single thing that they've done in history. They've never had their own independent state. They've never produced anyone of note. They've never had any famous artists. adventurers, explorers, scientists, kings, generals, like nothing. They have a terrible language too. They have a pretty good living standard, don't get me wrong, but completely unimpressive people, completely unimpressive nations. So yeah, sorry. Freeland's definitely getting F tier. F for Freelian. Next, does anyone know what this culture is over here? Croatia should have spoken a Romance language. Why though? Yes, that is Asturias. Do we have thoughts on Asturias? Close. Galicia is the next one. Galicia is the next one, but Asturias is that first one. Kingdom that resisted Mohammedan polytheist takeover. 'Tis true. 'Tis true. So any thoughts on where we should put the Asturians? Alright, doesn't seem like anyone has any, so I'm going to place Asturian culture E tier. So, as mentioned in the chat, the Asturians are the reason that Iberian culture exists today. They were the only ones who successfully resisted the Muslims when they first took over Iberia. So we got to give them respect for that. They've got an alright history, but, they quickly got incorporated into, Leon, later Castile, later Spain. And so, although they do have that cool aspect of their history, they haven't really done all that much ever since. Militarily, other than, resisting the Muslims at first, pretty much nothing of note when it comes to military history. Now, religiously, they're Catholic, but they're somewhat more serious, so, they're kind of in the middle for that. And they have a decent living standard, especially for somewhere in Southern Europe. So I will give them credit for that. They're also relatively based too. But at the same time, though, not a huge fan of the Asturian language. I mean, in general, I don't really like all the Romance languages all that much. The only ones I kind of respect are like French and Italian because, those are respectable languages. But Asturian, nah. But they do have a cool flag. I really like the flag. It's quite unique. Feels almost homey in a way. I don't know exactly why, but it does. So that's where I'm putting the Asturians. I don't think anyone has anything to say about the Galicians, so I'll put them next. They're also going into E tier. And Galicians quite similar to the Asturians in many respects. Not a huge fan of their religion. Their language. Religion's alright. Living standards alright. Somewhat based. Alright history, not much of a military record, and again, similar. The Galicians instead, though, they were more dominated by the Portuguese and Leonese instead of the Castilians, but of course they ended up under Spain, and so that's where they are now. But they have a cool flag too, so that's why Asturians and Galicians are both getting E tier. Now this is a country I know people actually have opinions on, so of course, España, Spain. Where are we going to put Spanish culture here? Long live the Lloremes and the Purépechas, you bastards. Spain F tier. Yo, I did not expect all this hate on the Spanish, bro. Yo, hey, why all the hate, brother? Why all the hate? Long live Mexico. Spain peaked a long time ago. That is true. Okay, you'll tell me why. All Spain does is whine about the Middle East. Okay, so we are not fans of Spain, clearly. I wasn't expecting all the Spanish hate. Where am I going to put Spain? I'm going to put Spain in C tier. And I'll explain why. So, with Spain, right? Spain's main advantage really is their history. I mean, Spain pretty much was forged on the frontier between Christianity and Islam. The Spanish, and by Spanish I mean the Castilians, because, you know, that is pretty much what Spanish culture is. Not all of Spain is the country, but, you know, that's what people think of, right? So the Castilians later, well, I shouldn't say later, because by that time the Muslims were gone, but the Castilians really formed their identity constantly fighting the Muslims, which is pretty awesome, right? They had the Reconquista. People were like, oh, it's the longest war. The Reconquista was not a war by any definition. It was a series of wars that lasted centuries, but it was not a war. But nevertheless, they resisted foreign occupation, Muslim occupation for centuries, which is very respectable. And then right after that, not only were they the first country to reach the Americas, but they pretty much kind of went on a just crazy expansion spree across Latin America. And with the exception of Brazil, pretty much Latin America is just Hispanic America. That's why Spanish is one of the most spoken languages in the world. I think it has like almost 500 million native speakers, and you know dozens, maybe dozens of millions of other speakers, maybe even over 100 million other speakers. I know I speak Spanish, even though I'm obviously not a native Spanish speaker. And so you got to respect that, right? You got to respect that they went from just fighting for their survival against the Muslims to creating one of the largest, most influential empires in history. And not only that, the first real superpower, let's say. And people like to say, oh, China or Rome were superpowers. Guys, Spain had influence in Europe, in North America, South America, Africa, Oceania, and Asia. The first truly global superpower. I mean, they were waging wars in the Netherlands, in France, in Mexico, in Peru, in Argentina, right, in the Philippines, against China, against Japan. I mean, these guys, I mean, they even freaking invaded Cambodia. So mad respect to Spanish for that. The problem, though, as someone pointed out in the chat, is they peaked ages ago. Pretty much, they had so much money, but were completely incompetent, went bankrupt so many times, and then lost basically to the French, and then have been pathetic ever since. And then once Napoleon invaded, their entire empire pretty much collapsed right away, and they went from the first global superpower to like a B tier country within Europe today, right? And they've been that way pretty much for the last 150 years. And their military record, again, quite impressive, but again, so much of that was in the past. Now, I do really like their flag, and so that helps quite a lot. Also, a lot of cool culture, right? A lot of cool literature, poetry, art, all that good stuff. But the problem, though, is historically they were like the bastions of Catholicism when we're trying to impose that all over Europe, suppress the Reformation. And now they're not even that Catholic. They're kind of just progressive, which is lame. And I'm not a huge fan of the language either. I mean, I speak it, but, you know, not a big fan. But again, pretty much Spain could be higher if it wasn't for the fact that they peaked so long ago and really didn't have that much of a good legacy. I mean, they created an entire civilization, but one which is very dysfunctional and which is very, very behind what it could be. I mean, you look at countries even that were more successful, such as Argentina, and they're still in a bad spot because Spanish colonialism sucked. So due to all that, Spain can only get a C tier. Next, we have Portugal. So what do we think of the Portuguese? Spain has a really cool and interesting history, styles, and aura factor. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Yes, based. Crispy Fritz, yo, this guy's been saying the best things in the chat today. Showed up at the end, but, you know, has been winning, just like America in the World Wars. Jean Duprat. I mean, I hope this is a real person, but if this is a real person, I have no clue who that is. Okay, he likes Portugal. This guy hates Portugal. Leo hates Portugal. Brazil is better than Portugal. I don't know if I'd say that, but I like Brazil though. All right, so Portugal has very mixed reviews. Where am I going to put Portugal? I'm going to put Portugal in B tier. I mean, like France, Portugal is kind of the only Latin country I would put up here. I mean, you can kind of tell I don't really like Latin cultures all that much. Partly because, you know, I'm half Germanic, so I got to defend that. And also I'm Protestant. But, you know, I respect Portugal quite a lot. Now, first of all, Portuguese have been great friends with English, so that already helps. They have a pretty cool history, especially when you think about the fact of how small they were, right? You think of this country literally kicked off colonialism, right? Literally was the first to go around Africa, reached India, you know, established the first kind of global maritime empire, and all of this while having a tiny population, like what, 1 million or less, right? Like one of the smallest countries, yet had such an enormous outsized impact, right? You had people like Henry the Navigator, you had cool artists as well. I mean, not as artistically impressive, but you know, they still had nice art, nice architecture, and militarily too. People forget Portugal's military was one of the best in the entire world. I mean, these guys were conquering lands in as far away as Brazil, as India, East Timor, right? They were contesting the Omanis, for example, and the Persians for, you know, the Gulf of Hormuz, funnily enough. And so you got to really respect these guys, that they had some of the best military. But the problem with Portugal, like Spain, is they peaked in the 1500s and they actually got absorbed into Spain and then became like an even lamer version of Spain. And that's kind of their problem. But at the same time, though, they've managed to preserve their culture quite well. It's pretty based for Western European standards. Their living standard, though, is not that good, so that does hold them back. Religiously, they're all right. They were Catholics, but not like that fanatic about it. But yeah, the Portuguese language, I'm learning it, and I speak it somewhat well, but it's just Spanish, but worse. You know, it's like drunk Spanish. But I really love their flag, and I think Portugal, given their small size, their impact on history has been tremendous. So they get B tier. Oh yeah, I forgot. Next is Romania. What do you think of Romania? When am I ranking Italy? I already ranked Italy. Italy is in C tier. Romanians are my favorite Latins. Awesome language and history. Anyone else have opinions on Romanians? Mountains belong to the Magyars. Yes. I already explained why Italy's so low. You'll have to rewatch that part of the stream later. Romanian, yeah, F tier. Not even close. Not even close. All right. Now, I know people are not going to like this. Here's the thing. Romania is very based. And that's the one thing I'll say about that. Very based, pretty religious. So we like that. But the rest of Romania is just unimpressive. Their history is all right. I mean, they're the only land survivors in the Slavic sea. And I respect that. But, like, there was never any real Romanian empire. You know, they were just kind of these principalities always being dominated by others. The Russians, the Hungarians, the Poles, the Ottomans. Yeah, they had Vlad the Impaler, who, I mean, I think is just a psychopath. Like, everyone's like, whoa, he's so cool, but he's just a psychopath. But even that aside, Romanian history is not all that cool. It's long, but it's not that cool. Militarily, quite unimpressive, pretty weak, and explains partly why they've been dominated for quite a long time. Not really much of cultural achievements, and their living standard is relatively low. But really, it's their language, man, and their flag. I hate both. I hate the flag and the language. So they're F tier. And the final Latins, finally, guys, Sardinians. So where are we putting them? Romania carried Operation Barbarossa, bro. Yeah, they were like alright in World War II, but like, I don't know, man. I can't think of any like great Romanian leaders, you know? Isn't sardines effing food? I love that. I'm actually pinning this one instead. Bro claims to be Italian but hasn't heard of Sardinia, bruh. Wow. Anyway, people don't really have much to say. Sardinia's F tier as well. Yeah, sorry. So first of all, Sardinia's contributed pretty much nothing culturally, and militarily too. The Sardinians are like the Celts of the Romance peoples. Like they just divided among themselves and were super lame. And they could have done a lot if they united, but they just spent all their time in these like dumb, pointless wars against each other. So not even that cool. Not a flat fan of their flag. It's just like the English plus the Corsican, and I'm not a huge fan of either flag, the English or the Corsican. So just mixing those two together doesn't exactly help your case. They're somewhat based, you know, they preserve their culture, but still, not that much. The living standard is decent, though. I'll give them that, and they are pretty Catholic, and I do respect that they've kept on to that, but just terrible language. One of the worst, honestly. Right, like down there with Friulian and Romanian and Albanian, like some of the worst languages. People are, oh, it's close to Latin or whatever, but Latin was cool. Latin had aura. Sardinian is just like, bruh, what? You know, it's like Sicilian, man. Yeah, so they're getting F tier. And there we go. We finally finished the Latin. So as you can tell, we're almost done. We're super close to finishing, which is kind of good because my throat is so sore right now. I'm just going to take a quick bathroom break. We'll be back. Do I know about Estonian rock incident? Yes, you guys remind me of this like every day, guys. So, we're not going over that one again. So, Estonia. Where are we putting Estonia? Well, I'm going to put Estonia in, I'm going to put Estonia C tier. So, here's the thing about Estonia, right? Estonia's language is pretty cool. All right, now it's a Baltic language. Not literally, I understand. It's not in the same language family as Latvian and Lithuanian, okay? It's Finno-Ugric, but it's in the Baltic. And the Baltics all have these cool languages, all right? And I'm even talking about, you know, other ones like Sweden, Denmark. They're all in the Baltics, Russia. I don't know. All the countries that border the Baltics, except Poland, have really cool languages. So I like the Estonian language. They're pretty based people as well. Living standard is not that good, but for, you know, they're recovering, you know, they were communists, so I don't blame them too much for that. They do have nice architecture though and all that. Now their history is not that impressive. The Estonians were some of the last pagans and they spent their time just being whacked by the Germans, but they did resist somewhat effectively, so I kind of respect them for that. But yeah, their military history not too impressive. I mean, they're dominated by the Germans, the Swedes, the Russians, Soviets, all that stuff. But I think what really helps though is they have the best flag, not just in this tier list, but I would say in Europe and possibly even the entire world. I love the Estonian flag. Very much captures their northern essence. And I love these like dark colors, but also mixed in with the white. So Estonia gets C tier, but you know, if they didn't have a cool flag, they definitely would be lower. You know, not too impressive. Society, all things said and done. Next, Finland. All right, so what do you think of the Finns? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that part. Sorry. Yeah, Estonia is one of the most irreligious countries. So also like greatly diminishes them. Love Finland. Bro, this guy's literally everything, guys. This guy's also, I'll bet you, he's like part Faroese and Basque and like Transnistrian at this point. They are Swedes in denial, yeah. You say that Finland's the greatest country in Asia. I understand the reference. Yes, you are correct in many ways. So where am I going to put Finland? Finland, we are putting in B tier. Alright, I'm a fan of Finland. So, here's the thing. Finland, their language isn't that good. I have to admit. Not a huge fan of the language. But they are, you know, Protestant and Lutheran, so that's based. We like that. We like their religious, you know, commitment to that, even though they're not that they're pretty secular now. Pretty high living standard. Of course, they are one of the Nordic countries, so pretty good living standard, all things said and done. Again, a little too cold and too many lakes. But we have more lakes in Canada, so, you know, for a Scandinavian country, they're not that not based, but could be better, of course. But they do have surprisingly good art and architecture, and I think that goes a little underrated. Now, their history is like not that impressive because pretty much it's just under Swedish rule for their entire rule, and then afterwards were under the Russians. But after they declared independence, the Soviets famously tried and failed to conquer them. So I respect them for that, but overall their history and military achievements isn't that much if you take it all considered. You know, and there are not that many famous, you know, Swedish philosophers, artists, intellectuals, that kind of stuff. And their flag's also kind of mid. But overall though, with that said, you know, good living standards, decent language, and they're Lutheran. So they're still B tier. Next, we have the Hungarians. So, what do we think of our Magyar brothers? Your brother is Basque, does that count? I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised at this point, man. Transylvania is Hungary. Yes. Yes, Transylvania is Hungary. I like that. Okay, so where am I going to put Hungary? Well, as I did with Finland, Hungarian culture, they're getting A tier. Or B tier, sorry. So, why is that? Well, thing about Hungary is their history is really, really cool. So these guys, you know, they come straight from Asia, the original Magyars, and just like take over the kind of Carpathian Basin, which in itself is not that impressive. I mean, several groups did it earlier. The Huns, who they actually have no relation to, as well as the Avars, but they actually managed to settle there and establish their culture. I mean, they came all the way from Central Asia, you know, settled in that area, became Christians, and had some of the coolest history, right? All things considered. I mean, they were their own kingdom for a very long time, quite influential. And they owned Croatia, they owned Transylvania, they owned Slovakia. Unfortunately, they got destroyed by the Ottomans and then sadly fell under Austrian control. But they never really fully submitted to the Austrians, and then they got their own independence. And while they made some questionable decisions during World War II, I still respect their history quite a lot. Militarily, they're alright, you know, they had some big victories, but also some big losses, such as Mohacs. Their flag's all right. It's not that bad, but I'm not a huge fan of their flag. But they are very based people. They are very conservative, very much want to preserve their traditions and their culture, and I respect that quite a lot. Also, religiously, not that great, Catholic, and also a lot of them are atheists. But at the same time, a lot of them were Protestants before being forced back to being Catholic, so I can forgive them a little more for that. Not a huge fan of the language, but there is something cool about it, right? And especially because it is, a Finno-Ugric kind of Asian language. There's that. And so now we get to the final two. Two of the most random and obscure, especially culturally speaking. Yes, this is Bulgarian. I somehow added twice, so it wasn't my fault. So we have, of course, the Basques and the Georgians. So what do we think of them? So Bulgaria already put in A tier or B tier, in case you were wondering. Okay, he likes the Georgians. Where are we putting the Basques? You love Basques? Or you got one Basque fan at least. My brother from another vajayjay. Yo, that's crazy. That's crazy. Okay. Where are the Basques? We're going to put the Basques in E tier. Alright, here's the thing about the Basques. Okay, so, pretty good, living standard, and I like their flag. But that's kind of all I can say that's positive about them. Culturally have contributed almost nothing. And I get it, they're stuck between the Spanish and, the Aragonese for a while, as well as the French. But still, haven't really contributed very much. Militarily, pretty much nothing. They were conquered for a lot of their history. They're stuck between France and Spain and really want their independence. I mean, their terrorist group had some aura, but, can't really say much else past that. They're not even that based either. They're kind of like leftists and, anarchists, these types. So, and also their language it's not bad, but, it's not even Indo-European and it's kind of lame. So not a huge fan of the Basque language either. So yeah, unfortunately, other than the flag, not much positive I can say. And finally, we get to the Georgians. This is the final one for today. Georgians, we're putting them D tier, okay? So here's the thing about the Georgians, right? The Georgian language is actually somewhat cool, and I really respect the fact that they're Orthodox and some of the oldest Orthodox people in the world. Now, they are very based. I think out of any European country, they are like by far the most based. Very conservative, very Christian, so I really respect that. Militarily, their history is not very impressive. They've been divided too often and therefore, come under foreign rule. Ottomans, Russians, Armenians, all that jazz. But, at the same time, they have a decent flag. It's like the English flag, but, with more English flags in between. Clearly, I think we can all see that pattern. But yeah, overall they're kind of underdeveloped. They have separatist regions, so yeah, they're gonna be D tier. Like, they have some potential, but that's it. Anyway, that is it, everyone. That is my full tier list. So again, well, why don't we start from the bottom? F tier, we got Sardinian, Romanian, Friulian, Occitan, Sicilian, Corsican, Manx, Bosniak, and Albanian. So a lot of Romance, but not exclusively Romance cultures. E tier, we got Basque, we got Galician, Asturian, Catalan, Cornish, Slovak, Czech, Slovenian, Rusin, and Armenian. For D tier, we got Georgian, Frisian, Irish, Breton, Welsh, Macedonian, Ukrainian. So quite a lot of Celts down there. C tier, we got Estonian, Spanish, Aragonese, Walloon, Italian, Flemish, Icelandic, Croatian, and Belarusian. Now, for B tier, we got Hungarian, Finnish, Portuguese, French, Greek, Polish, Bulgarian, and we're almost done here. We got the Dutch here, and a lot of these other groups, some Serbs, Baltics, Scots. Okay, and finally we got S tier, of course, the goats. You got the Germans, the English, Norwegian, Swedish, and the Russians. So that's it, everyone. Tell me your thoughts, and then we're gonna end. Having purely BS, bro. What? This is an objective. This is an objective take, guys. Like this is scientific, guys. I spent like a few days doing research for this. Albanian cultures is driving Mercedes. I like how this guy shows up at the end, bro. Showing up at the end, that's crazy. Anyway, obviously we know Nioski has bad taste, but any other final thoughts before we end today? Yeah. We didn't include Turks on purpose. Why is Armenia so low? The thing about Armenia is just they're kind of underdeveloped and like they peaked too long ago. If we want to sum it up that way. And their language is meh. Anyway, where's Gambia? Alright guys, well anyway, I gotta head out. But thanks for coming. Thanks for 3,600 subscribers, even though all of you guys were here way before that. But yeah, thanks for this good birthday stuff. We will be redoing the Americas at some point because we did that, but that one was worse than my old European one, so I want to do like a better one. Anyway, that'll be a little harder, but it'll be more worth it. So, see ya guys.